Okay. So I don't like that I have to make this video, but these are the circumstances I find myself in. I don't like YouTube drama videos. I tend to avoid them like the plague. I, generally speaking, don't really consider it any of my goddamn business. But that's me, and other people have a vested interest in the people involved. Probably not me, but I feel like it's important that everyone's side gets heard, and I'm pretty sure mine's the only one that hasn't been at this point. There was a court of public opinion before I even knew it. I found out about all of this happening about 4 hours ago. So, or at least about, everyone being told about it in apparently explicit detail. So, for those who aren't aware, Cyberweasel89 and SpokenSoftly of the Vaniflux podcast are now formally of the Vaniflux podcast for differing but related reasons. So I guess the first thing I should probably do is bring people up to speed. You might have noticed there wasn't a podcast for this week. We did release a video. It was a review of the new Ruby episode that was recorded mostly because we ended up having the time. So the reason there was no podcast was we all sat down to record it. It was going fairly well. Spoken had to leave it early because reasons. Banking, something like that. I don't know. It wasn't really any of my business. I don't know why I bothered saying it in that case, because it's not really yours either, but he mentioned it on the show, so, or he would have. Then Patient was in the middle of giving his own segment, what he'd been doing, the usual spiel that we usually do on the podcast, and he mentions his girlfriend doing something. I forget what. It's not really important to the circumstance, but he mentioned her. And Weasel decided to chime in and made a mistake that she has made several times, which is to use someone's real name. Now, the usual circumstance for that is that she would mention the name of someone she knows. A little bit sketchy. They probably didn't give permission for their name to be used in such a public forum, especially for the things she was mentioning them having been doing. So we brought up, hey, this is not cool. Don't use people's real names. I think I might be mistaken. I think she might have made the same mistake previously for the same person, but she made the mistake again with Patient's girlfriend, who I don't know about her, said girlfriend. I don't know whether she's comfortable with that. I know Patient very definitely isn't comfortable with that. He has brought it up before. So yes, she had made this mistake about him before. Yeah. So having done that, Patient, in his stern voice, which is usually left for other things that we tend to talk about on the podcast that Patient does not really approve of, but doesn't go overboard in, like he doesn't stop us talking about it. He just says, okay, I kind of have a problem with this, so I'm bowing out. But he uses his stern voice to do so. He did so to reprimand Weasel and said, "Weasel!" in about that tone, maybe a little louder. I pointed out this had been several times that she had made this mistake. I wasn't angry. I'd already resolved myself to edit that bit out anyway. It's a thing I've had to do before. Unfortunately, I was getting used to it. So, with those two things having been said to her, Weasel dropped out of the call, out of the recording. And if memory serves, she went offline. So I reacted poorly to this. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I probably said something I would later regret in hindsight, knowing the circumstances of what had happened. But I was very angry. That's the only excuse I have. Yeah. At the very least, she wasn't there to hear it, which is good. I don't even remember what it was, but I have to assume I said something unpleasant. So, this having happened, as I say, I was very, very angry. We ended up having to stop the recording because patient immediately started blaming himself, which he tends to do because he is an kind to a fault is probably the way I would describe it. He is very nice, almost to self-destructive points. I love the guy, I really do, but this wasn't his fault in any way, shape, or form. So, patient started blaming himself. I was furious, and we knew she had reacted badly to it. We didn't know to what extent. Everyone was confused, or angry, or self-recriminating. Not exactly the best state to be continuing to record a podcast, where we try and be upbeat and fun and entertaining. So we had to cancel it. An entire recording session was gone, which did not help my mood. And in the heat of the moment, I made some decisions. I didn't act on them, but in my head, I had made the decisions. I spoke to some people, none of them involved, just for advice on how to handle the thing. Took that on board, and advice that they didn't give, but I decided to give myself, was to sleep on it and see how I felt in the morning. So I did. And with a clear head and more even temperament, I'll say I decided that yes, that was the last straw. Weasel had made mistakes before, fairly regularly. It was a problem that I was willing to tolerate. As far as I'm aware, that all of us were willing to tolerate, mostly because I was the one that doing the work to fix it. That's mean. I apologize. I'm not going to edit this, to be clear, so that at least it's natural in that sense. That you can't say I'm chopping out bits where I said things that I probably shouldn't have said, tidied it up and such. This is just me talking. That's it. So, clear head, I decided she'd made some mistakes. That was a problem. She had decided to drop out in the middle of a recording session before this point, which was a problem. When something didn't go her way or she felt hard done by, she would decide to snipe at people, which I have in the past actually edited out for the sake of people not having problems with that. It is probably the first time I have felt I had to edit anything anyone said out for the sake of keeping the show entertaining. That's actually a very, very high bar to reach as far as problems go. If you might have seen the show, I'm kind of lazy when it comes to editing. I'm not going to lie. So the fact that she reached that point was a problem, but I let it slide. In fact, you might remember the episode. It was, if you're familiar, it was the one where She was trying to recommend something, and Zero cut her off and said, "Oh God, I've seen 1,000 of this thing before. It's terrible." And she dropped out. About 20 minutes later, we had all by this point realized, okay, it was probably too far, and she really didn't appreciate it. She comes back later, and Zero immediately apologizes. Just like, okay, great. That's great. Okay. Water under the bridge, we can move on, and it'll be fine now. And then Weasel decided to keep sniping at it and trying to guilt trip him into I don't know what. Like, he had already apologized. I don't know what she was expecting him to do after that. After he had apologized and she was still picking at the thing that he had done wrong. I don't know what it accomplished. I don't know if she knows what it accomplished. And I know Zero didn't ask me to talk about this and didn't actually give me permission to talk about this. But I'm just talking. So this was not the first time that we'd had this problem. It was the second. And this is the first time that she had killed an entire recording session single-handedly. And that was not a thing I could accept. So, again, having thought about it, cleared my head, I decided enough was enough, and then I was going to ask Weasel to leave the show. On trying to contact her, the response I got was, I asked, can we talk? There is something we really need to talk about. And her response was, and I have the chat log to quote, there it is, can't talk, crying. I am not an especially social person. My camera's just darkened, I just noticed that. I'm not a social person. I don't know how to deal with people when they're in emotional distress, especially when I'm the cause of it. Surprisingly enough, being such an asshole, that doesn't actually happen all that often. So I suggested, okay, thinking to myself, she won't talk to me, I'm going to need Spoken's help, because I don't know how to fix this, or, well, not fix it, but I don't know how to get her to talk to me so that I can do what I feel like I have to. So I speak to Spoken. And I say, in fact, I don't speak to Spoken. I say, okay, Weasel, I don't know what to do with that. I'm sorry. I didn't say I'm sorry. Just talking, as we've established. I said, I don't know what to do with that. So maybe it's best if you talk to Spoken about what happened. And I won't talk to him about it first. Just talk to Spoken and ask either one of you to get back to me. So time passes, and eventually Spoken comes online, and I say, hey, you should really talk to Weasel. Didn't know whether he had. Just said, you should do so. And I promised, she hadn't responded, but I had promised that I wouldn't get involved and say anything to him about what had happened so that he could get her side first. So that way there would be someone on her side and it wouldn't feel like she was being attacked from all sides. And he got in touch with her, said she thinks that I was going to kick her out of the show because, bear with me, okay, thinks she's been disinvited from the podcast because the incident that happened yesterday broke the patient one's patience and made more work for Casey. I responded, largely correct, though the reasoning was not. And he said, what was the reason? I said, I asked whether she was okay to talk, or whether she would prefer to go through Spoken as an intermediary. This would be the second time that he would act as intermediary between me and Weasel. First time was an entirely unrelated incident. I asked for his help because I didn't know how best to talk to someone with Weasel's specific issues, and he offered advice and then offered to be in the middle. And just, I don't know. I don't know what he did, because he did it. And just said what the outcome was. And I do thank him for that, because I don't know how well he handled it, but I guarantee I would have handled it worse. So I do thank him for that. And so we get into it, and I say, this has been only the most recent in a long-running line of problems that we've had. And enough was enough, essentially. I'm paraphrasing massively. There were a lot more words said, but that's basically the gist of what I said. And at this point, to be clear, at this point, long after I'd made my decision for what was going to happen next, Spoken tells me what had actually happened when Weasel had dropped out of the call. And at this point, I don't know what has been said and what has not been said, because again, I'm not privy to the court of public opinion that's going on in another Discord channel that I don't have access to currently. So, for the sake of politeness and propriety, I won't say what the actual problem was, but it was severe and she reacted badly to what had happened. So, because of that, and finding, oh, there was a serious reason, that doesn't really change the circumstance of a lot of the stuff that happened. And even so, it doesn't really change the fact that an entire recording session was lost because of this thing. And frankly, it can't be great for her either that this could be triggered just by someone speaking her screen name in a sharp tone. That is, I'm going to say, dangerous. That is not a good environment to be in. Like, the podcast can get heated sometimes. We do have some very, let's say, agitated debates and arguments. And, you know, that particular issue would cause problems for everyone involved. And while it does say, okay, discrimination, what exactly am I supposed to do? Just let nothing happen because Weasel reacted badly, everyone else is doing fine, but we need to cater to Weasel's needs before anyone else's? Like, wow, okay, if I was editing this, that would have been cut out, probably. But, again, honesty. I'm going to get back to that particular issue because it's a whole hell of a can of worms, and there are other circumstances that need to be addressed before we get to that, but I will come back to that. So, that happened, and, you know, we talked it out, and Weasel accepted it. I don't know how well she accepted it, because I once again tried to talk to her, and she, bear with me, Tata just told me you're banning me from the podcast, grieving now. I assume some of that was tongue-in-cheek, but it's very hard to tell sometimes with Weasel. So, I didn't know what to do with that either, so I just left it. Spoken said he wouldn't leave the show over this, is what he said at the time. This was the Tuesday, I believe. So I'm like, okay. Okay, said I wasn't going to edit this. Then my phone decided, oh, I've run out of space. So, now there's a cut. Sorry. Where was I? Spoken said he was still going to remain on the show. That was on the Tuesday. I thought, okay. Weasel said she was grieving now, whatever that means. Probably a joke, but sometimes hard to tell with Weasel. I've said that before. I think I lost my place. I'm sorry. I had to fix my phone. So I'm like, okay, I'll let the dust settle on this for a few days. We don't have to record again together until next Monday. So I'll leave it, let the dust settle, and we'll come back to this and we'll decide how all of this is going to come out. Because we would have to say something, obviously. I don't know. I didn't know how much Weasel wanted to be told, whether she wanted to give full details and everything, or if they just want to say we parted, we had some differences, yada yada, standard media control BS. I didn't know. So I thought I'd give it a few days and then ask. Cut to Saturday. Saturday evening. I signed into Discord and Weasel is not online. Okay, fair enough. But Spoken is. So I try talking to Spoken. I'm like, okay, hey, what's up? How's it going? Got a cold and such and such and such and such. Small talk. And then I believe he brings up, but I'm going to double check. Oh, right. I said, I hope that Weasel is talking to you again, because she had hung up on him previously. Yeah. Spoken has been stuck in a shit situation for this entire thing. I'm not going to lie about that. There are extenuating circumstances that I think I mentioned earlier. But, yeah, he has been stuck in the middle, and I am sorry about that, for what it's worth. Which is probably not a lot because he fucking hates me now, but we'll get to that. So he brings up after that that people are pretty irritated about her having been kicked off the podcast because of something beyond her control. Yeah. Her making mistakes is somewhat beyond her control, I suppose. Though he's actually talking about how I insinuated that my decision was because she had... Okay, so there's one cut because I had to edit because I almost said something that I don't know whether she's okay with me having said. So, not for my sake, for hers. It's harder to stick with that thing than I thought it would be. So, yeah. Her reaction to what had happened was I insinuated that that was why I chose to ask her to leave. That wasn't the case. I kind of have chat logs to prove it, but nobody cares about proof these days. Sorry. That's unfair. I literally heard about people having problems with this secondhand, and then the person that told me to go fuck myself. So feeling a little bit like there's a witch hunt going on right now. Sorry if I get a little acerbic sometimes. So, yeah. People were irritated. They feel like I discriminated against her. Again, I had made the decision before that, but I did insinuate that, yeah, that would be a circumstance where I would have been uncomfortable keeping her on the show. I would have been. Like I say, it would... I don't want people to have that sort of reaction to something because of me or because of something I'm creating. That's not what I want to do for or to people. That's not what I look for. That's not why I started this channel in the first place. So the idea that that could happen because of the project I started is not okay with me. So when he said that that was the reason that she had dropped out of the call, I was like, oh, what's a really fucking bad idea for her to be part of the show then? Because she could have a reaction like that at any time. And as far as I was concerned, once was bad enough. I don't want to cause that in people. So, yeah. I then said something that Spoken took pretty poorly, which was doubling down on my opinion that everything I just said. And this was where I lost Spoken, which is to assume that he was ever actually going to stay on to begin with, given the circumstances, but that's... I can only speculate. I didn't think he would. I was very surprised when he said he would on the Tuesday, but... So after saying my piece about that, he responds in the FandomFox Discord channel that we used to record. I feel it only fair at this point that I at least say what Spoken said and quote that directly. So I'm going to try to, bear with me. My eyes are terrible. By the way, I have problems too, so I know how it fucking feels, motherfucker. But, so don't talk to me about fucking discrimination, you shit. But, again, stream of consciousness, trying to stick by this as much as I possibly can. And I didn't sleep before I started this video because I felt like I didn't have time to. Because... kind of under the gun, because finding out about this on the Saturday, that they had already decided to air all of this dirty laundry without talking to me at all. I guess, to an extent, it's not really my business how they talk about what happened to them. Fine. I guess. Yeah, that's fine. I can't really speak to that. That's their call. And I actually said as much, that, yeah, I wasn't expecting them to just air all of it, but that's their call. I'll have to talk about it on the podcast now because, you know, it's out there. I can't not mention it because then it's just the elephant in the room. That's not right. Can't do that. So, yeah, I said, okay, I was going to ask you how you wanted me to tell everyone about this. And... well, you've done it already, so I guess I'll settle for just not being an asshole about it on the podcast, and we'll just leave it at that. Just say what happened, and that there were no hard feelings. At the time, there weren't. Yeah. So, after saying that, about 10 to midnight, give or take, my time, granted, Spoken leaves a message in the FandomFox Discord channel that we used to record. I've mentioned that and I got off track, but it was relevant. And to quote his entire speech, so to speak. So I'm going to be upfront, Casey. You've come to me multiple times in the past asking me to intervene between you and Weasel instead of just talking to her. Twice, as an aside. Once because I didn't know how to talk to her properly and asked for his advice. which he gave, and then intervened to do it himself. Once, where I offered to talk to her directly, and he said fucking no. So, eat it. Still a little raw, like I say. So, you've given me the unenviable task of breaking bad news or delivering a bad opinion to her on multiple occasions. Again, I offered to do it myself, but you said you'll do it. I would have been irritated at that this time, but you kicking her off the podcast without, as far as I'm aware, any attempt to actually communicate with her, and again, I said that I had tried to talk to her, and she said no, and then I asked to talk to her, and he said no. So, as far as I'm aware, any attempt to actually communicate with her and ensure that you could come up with a solution. Well, no, I didn't. What solution could I give for her constantly, not constantly, but very regularly making mistakes that cause me problems, that cause other people on the show problems, that cause the audience problems? The amount of times people have come to me complaining about Weasel's high-pitched squealing, causing them pain, or just being incredibly loud, to the point where I have in the past had to go back and edit it to be quieter. Yeah, I don't know how that could be solved, because we have mentioned at least the loudness thing several times with not much benefit, as in I ended up turning down her volume specifically myself, and then she still ends up just squeaking as loud as possible. I don't know how to fix that if she's going to just keep doing it. So I feel like this is starting to get just me ragging on Weasel, which might come off as unfair. But the real reason why she is leaving the show was never about her problems that I don't feel comfortable talking about without her permission, without her express permission. So, still in the middle of reading this quote, by the way. It was very long. Come up with a solution, and then telling me that just because it's beyond her control doesn't mean it can be ignored. Which is the kind of thing that would get you brought up in court for improper termination if this were a proper workplace instead of a bunch of guys hanging out. That bit of flippancy was the straw that broke the camel's back, as you might say. It's a thing I said to him previously that he's decided to try and throw back in my face. Is okay, it's a popular idiom. It's not an insult. It just means it was the last in a long line of problems. So it's not just about the thing that she had a problem with. You are saying the exact thing. You are quoting me on the exact thing that was the problem, and you're trying to pretend it's about something else. No. I'm enough of a dick that I won't judge people when they're dickish. And I both respect and enjoy talking with most everyone else on here. But I can't continue working on a project run by someone this, italics, cowardly, and italics, incompetent. I wish you all success in your endeavors. They will not involve me in future. At this point, he blocked me, by the way. So, cowardly thing, take him with a grain of salt. Fuck you, dude. I'm just evolving into insult at this point. Taking a breath. I apologize. But yeah, cowardly. Cowardly. I offered to do it myself. I offered to talk to it myself. You said no. So, I'm sorry if that looks cowardly to you. But I don't know what you were expecting me to do there. And this time, like, again, this time, I probably would have talked to Weasel myself again. I would have asked her, because hopefully she would have cooled down at this point, and we'd been able to talk out, okay, how would you like this to come out? And she probably would have said, oh, it's already out. She wasn't online. So I went to Spoken, who was. So, yeah, I don't appreciate being called a coward for things that were entirely out of my control. I don't appreciate being accused of discrimination. I don't. How would he have preferred me to handle this situation, is what I'm wondering. Because. No, I've pretty much said my piece. That's pretty much it. I've said all of the facts, I've laid out the events from start to finish. And that crack about disabilities, I just want to mention, there's usually a reason for disability discrimination. Usually it's because it gets in the way of the person doing the job. It sucks. I know from personal experience that some people cannot do some jobs because of their ailments. You can't contest that. That is a thing that happens, and it's a thing that should happen when it can cause grief and strife and difficulty for people, and there is no way around it. And you know what they do in a workplace? If someone has difficulty doing the job they're assigned because of a disability, they don't fire them usually. You're right, they don't. They usually find another place in the business where they can do what they need to do, rather just do a job so they can stay employed. Where would you like me to move her to, Spoken? Would you like me to move her to, I don't know, what are the other roles we have in this YouTube channel where everyone is given the role of on-mic talent, so to speak? Yeah, that's not arrogant, that's just usually what the job title is. So, what would she have been better suited doing in our quote-unquote organization, in our quote-unquote workplace? Because I have no idea. There was no other solution to this. Now, I expect that this is going to go over poorly because it's YouTube drama, and YouTube drama always ends in people very directly stating their opinions and stating that the other person is wrong in very definitive terms. Let's say, for the sake of politeness, says the guy that's been swearing for most of this video. So, I'm not going to disable the comments, because people are going to talk about this anyway. They're going to talk about it elsewhere, at the place wherever Spoken and or Weasel and or Patient, I don't know who said something. I assume either Weasel or Patient, Weasel or Spoken rather, because it was their business. People are going to talk about it there. People are going to be talking about it in the comments here. I ask that that be where it stops. So if you have problems with the decision I made, the reasons I made it, or you feel Weasel was hard done by, or you feel I shit on Spoken too much, I'm still very angry, so I apologize possibly for some of it. It's quite possible some of it wasn't deserved at all. And I do understand that he was basically sticking up for his girlfriend in this situation. And I understand that, and it's frankly why I expected him to say he wasn't going to be part of the show as soon as this all went down on Tuesday. I understand all that. So, yeah. Some of the things I said in this video probably weren't deserved when directed at him. doesn't really stop me from being angry about it, unfortunately. So if you have problems with that and want to tell me a new one about it, or anything else in this video, or anything else in this situation, feel free to do so. I'm not going to stop you. The comment section for this video is going to be a sewer. But don't bring it anywhere else, please. Like, no one else on the cast had any input on this decision. It was just me and Weasel and Spoken that talked about this. Pretty much everyone else decided they wanted to stay out of it, so they did. So don't bother them with this drama. Don't bother them in the podcast comments or any of the other shows that we do. Don't bother. Definitely don't fucking bother anyone from the Crossbrain about this that was completely uninvolved. Leave all of them out of this. Leave Patient out of this. Because as I have had to keep telling him, it is not his fault in any way. So just leave it here. Leave it here. And just come at me. Because I'm going to get an email for every comment because I don't turn those off. So you want to throw shit at me, you can do so. But I stand by my decision. And assuming you listened to the whole thing, thanks for listening.